Welcome to the National Presidential Wax Museum in Keystone, South Dakota. The Wax Museum was founded in 1971 by famous Hollywood wax sculptor Madame Catherine Stuberg and renowned movie set designers Don and Bonnie McPhee. It had always been a dream of Madame Stuberg's to create a museum dedicated exclusively to the United States presidency and considered it the capstone of her prolific career. Originally named the Parade of Presidents Wax Museum, the National Presidential Wax Museum is the only wax museum in the world to feature every U.S. president.
First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. These words spoken at George Washington's funeral are as meaningful now as they were then. For 2 terms under his strong guiding hand, from 1789 to 1797, our young country established its independent roots. At the end of America's fight for freedom, there was talk of Washington being made king, but a clean break from the British crown was needed. And it was Washington's success as a military leader that led to his election as the nation's first president, the only person ever to be unanimously chosen. For all of his strength and bravery on the battlefield, Washington approached the newly created office of the presidency with doubts. My movements to the chair of government will be accompanied by feelings not unlike those of a culprit who's going to the place of his execution, he wrote his friend Henry Knox. Surprisingly, this former commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Forces loved to dance and was more comfortable being called general than president. But Washington in the presidency, as in the Revolution, was the rock on which a country's dream rested. He was aware of the need to build an executive structure that could accommodate future leaders. And the presidency has proved itself to be the most remarkable political office in history. Sometimes an initial lack of success leads to bigger things. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln ran against Stephen A. Douglas for Senator of Illinois. Lincoln set the tone for that campaign when he addressed the volatile slavery issue with his prophetic statement, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Douglas accepted Lincoln's challenge to participate in 7 debates throughout Illinois. Between August and October, crowds as large as 20,000 stood for 3 hours in each city to hear them speak. A New York Evening Post reporter wrote, "In repose, I must confess that Long Abe's appearance is not comely, but stir him up and the fire of genius plays on every feature. Listening to him, calmly and unprejudiced, I was convinced that he has no superior as a stump speaker." Interestingly, Catherine Stuberg Keller modeled Lincoln's face from a copy of a rare 1860 life-cast mask of the president she had acquired. She then loaned the mask to Disney to make their famous Talking Lincoln at Disneyland. Lincoln lost the senatorial election, but in debating with Douglas, he gained a national reputation that won him the Republican nomination for president in 1860. In the months between his election and inauguration, 7 states of the Deep South, those most dependent on slavery, left the Union. Just a few weeks later, Confederate officials demanded the surrender of Fort Sumter in the harbor off Charleston, South Carolina. On April 12, 1861, they fired on the fort, and the only war fought on American soil began. "Do what you can with what you have where you are," the robust and outspoken Roosevelt said, and he proceeded to do just that as he worked his way through a series of adventures on his way to the presidency. as a rancher and sheriff in the Dakota Territory, as a writer of books and magazine articles, and as a lieutenant colonel during the Spanish-American War, leading a ragtag volunteer cavalry unit made up of football players, cowboys, and polo players, known as the Rough Rider Regiment. Newspaper reports of this American cavalry hero brought him fame and gave him the nickname he never liked, Teddy. On September 13, 1901, while on a mountain climbing expedition in the Adirondacks, Roosevelt learned that McKinley had been shot and was dying. The 42-year-old vice president hurried to the house where McKinley's body lay. There, Roosevelt took the oath, making that damned cowboy, in the words of party boss Mark Hanna, the youngest president of the United States. When the reserved, teetotaling Calvin Coolidge took office after the corruption of Harding's administration, America was in the midst of the Roaring Twenties. During his term between 1923 and 1929, Lindbergh made his famous flight. Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, and the stock market was booming. Silent Cal's talent as a politician lay in his penchant for taking a hands-off approach to government. He believed that the president gets the best advice he can find, uses the best judgment at his command, and leaves the event in the hands of Providence. In the spring of 1927, President Coolidge and his wife spent a 3-week summer holiday in the Black Hills that turned into a 3-month stay. The rustic game lodge in Custer State Park became the Summer White House. There, Coolidge took up trout fishing and was amazed at how many he caught. Although he worked on his father's winning 1988 presidential campaign, George W. Bush came to politics relatively late in life. His focus finally sharpened in 1994 when at age 48 he won election as governor of Texas. Emerging as the Republican frontrunner in the 2000 race for president, past family history brought George W. Bush record-setting contributions of almost $40 million in his first 4 months of fundraising. His vague message of compassionate conservatism seemed to find favor with a country looking for change. World War II had been going on for almost 6 years when Harry Truman was sworn in as Franklin Roosevelt's vice president on January 20th, 1945. But Truman scarcely saw the president after the inauguration because critical negotiations with Joseph Stalin required Roosevelt's presence in Russia. Truman had received little, if any, briefing on the secret development of the atomic bomb or the difficulties with Soviet Russia when he was suddenly confronted with finding solutions to wartime problems that Roosevelt had struggled with for 2 terms of his presidency. Franklin D. Roosevelt learned from the charitable actions of his father that children from the upper class had a duty to society. Franklin was 5 when his father took him to the White House. There, President Cleveland told the boy, "My little man, I am making a strange wish for you. It is that you will never be President of the United States." But given Roosevelt's heritage, that seemed impossible. By birth or by marriage, FDR was related to no less than 11 presidents, including 5th cousin Theodore Roosevelt. At the age of 34, FDR's political career was plunged into limbo when he was diagnosed with polio. His wife Eleanor said, "I know that he had real fear when he was first taken ill, but he learned to surmount it. After that, I've never heard him say he was afraid of anything." In his inauguration speech in 1933, during the height of the Great Depression, the visionary Roosevelt gave hope to dispirited Americans throughout the nation, assuring them, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the first president born in the 20th century, came from a rich, politically connected Boston family of Irish Catholics. But Kennedy's determination to make his own way was apparent. From his act of heroism as a PT boat commander during combat in the Pacific, to the Pulitzer Prize-winning book he wrote, Profiles in Courage. Kennedy's ambitious run for the presidency in 1960 utilized the emerging power of television in a series of debates with his Republican challenger, Richard Nixon. Some men see things as they are and say, "Why?" I dream things that never were and say, "Why not?" It was this attitude of Kennedy's that led to the successes of his administration. A face-off with the Soviets over the presence of missiles in Cuba, support for the civil rights movement, formation of the Peace Corps, and a push for space exploration. But that list will always be incomplete, leaving us to wonder what might have been. Starting with Andrew Jackson in 1835, there have been 11 attempts to kill an American president. Assassins' bullets had taken 3 of them, Lincoln, McKinley, and Garfield. On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy became the 4th.